see, that's where a lot of this begins. At least the next step begins in the transformation into Reform Judaism. We did something of the dedication ceremony. We did something of the dedication address, and this is really something of the beginning of what is called Reform Judaism. And it's a Jacobson's dates are 1768 to 1828. And the Season School was around 1801. And this, I think, temple dedication, I think, is around 1810. So it's moving very quickly in Germany, as you can see. Let me just try to give you a few of the background situations that I'm telling you that the best presentation of this is in Rudowski. So if you look at Rudowski, page 156, chapter 7, you'll find the material that will cover this quite well if you have that book. He speaks about an early predecessor of Jacobson called Friedlander, who lives longer but is born 3 years earlier. And he already starts this process of revamping Judaism. I think you can read that yourself. Jacobson, 1768 to 1828. And he gives you a pretty good discussion of Jacobson's activities. And the interesting thing then is that he moves to Berlin after that, Jacobson does. And we then get a Berlin movement towards reform. And the big situation that develops in Berlin and northern Germany is the prayer book. Now, I don't think he's behind the activities in Hamburg. But in 1817, Hamburg is involved in this kind of activity, and in 1818 a temple is dedicated in Hamburg. There you have, by 1822, you have confirmation exercises with girls. So they still have well, the problem is, again, the prayer for the return to Zion. How can you, if Germany is the fatherland, how are you going to pray for a return to Zion? So that seems to be the thing that is preoccupying them over and over again in trying to revamp these matters. So you get this Hamburg prayer book edited in 1819, and again, as I said, Rudowski covers this in pretty good detail. For instance, you're now going to get instrumental music on the Sabbath, and the organ, which is going to be introduced into the music, choir and organ, is considered a good innovation in order to make the services more attractive to the people. This is in Hamburg. What's called, a lot of the proponents of this looked upon the Judaic aspects of these things as Oriental, the sort of Oriental aspects of Judaic expression, as they would have put it, was detraction to dignity and reverence. So German was the real language that should be used in the prayer, and Yiddish, for instance, was a degraded language, which I think most of us would agree that it's a medieval vernacular language and so on. Well, anyway, so there the battle is joined, And in 1820, you get Leipzig, another city in Germany, which becomes a branch of the Hamburg Temple. And these things also go on in Denmark in 1814, in Vienna in 1826, even coming to America, to Charleston in 1824, these kinds of temples and so on. But what was also developing side by side, this is really the movement towards reform, but what is really developing side by side with all this is a thing called the science of Judaism, the science of Judaism school. And a lot of these individuals are making claims to be doing this in a scientific manner, or wishing that they could do this in a scientific manner. Now, Rudovsky does a good job of explaining the influence of Hegel on these people. Hegel is really the preeminent German philosopher of the time, and his dates are coincident with all of this, what's happening, 1770 to 1831. His philosophy, of course, is what we now call the idealism school, but it basically centers around a kind of historical evolution idea, that all things are in flux and unfolding and developing. And I'm not a great expert on Hegel, and as I said, Rudovsky has a pretty good description of it. But if you look at your Hegel ideas, mainly he has the whole idea of the zeitgeist. The zeitgeist, since things are in flux and unfolding. Let's see, I've got another thing that I can put on the board here. Spirit of the time, in case you don't know German. Geist is spirit, Zeit is time. That it's the spirit of the time that should determine what would be the proper expression for a given moment. You know, Hegel's famous for the idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And this is sort of what he presents in his thinking. Again, I'm not a great Hegelian, as historical dialectic. First you have a thesis, then there's an antithesis, and finally you have a synthesis. I think he thinks, why he calls this dialectic, I don't know. But in any case, dialectic is something that